Hi, Kushal.
Hello.
Hi, viewers.
Hello,
Greetings
viewers.
from Setu.
Good
Greetings
morning.
from Toronto. We are back again with an illustrious Indian writer, poet, journalist, editor, lawyer, and a young rising star of the literary sky, Kushal Poddar. It's great pleasure for Setu to host Kushal Poddar for the 12th episode of the limited video series of literary and critical conversations. As you know, this journal has been at the forefront, highlighting the over and career trajectories of eminent creatives and their views on life and fine arts. Now, a brief introduction of our guest. Kushal Poddar is a journalist, a father, and the editor of Words Surfacing, an online literary magazine. With works translated into 12 languages, he has authored 8 books published across the globe. The titles of his books are The Circus Came to My Island, published by Spare Change Press, Ohio. A Place for Your Ghost Animals by Ripple Effect Publishing, Colorado Springs. Understanding the Neighborhood, BRP Australia. Scratches Within, published by Barbara Mart, Florida. Kleptomaniac's Book of Unoriginal Poems, BRP Australia. Eternity Restoration Project, Selected and New Poems, Havakal Publishers, India. Herding My Thoughts to the Slaughterhouse, a prequel by Alien Buddha Press. And last of all, Postmarked Quarantine, published by Ice Flow Press, Canada. Friends, he's active on social media too. You will find him more on Twitter. On behalf of Setu, I extend a hearty welcome to him. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the 12th episode of the limited video series of literary and critical conversations, Kushal. Well,
I am so honored to be a part of your uh, ever-sprawling endeavor. I mean, from that magazine that has made already its mark in the on the culture and also on the reader's mind. And now this video version, and I do not know what future is holding for us.
so it's showcasing your over. This episode, we welcome him to the 12th episode of the limited video series of literary and critical conversations. And here's a composition for you guys by Kushal. The poem is titled The Asylum. The recovering men in pyjama toil in the garden, silence hunched in the chairs, the wild hands crossed on their mad chests. A white warden hammers a nail into the mid-torso where 2 sleeves meet. A garden man brings a rose to decorate the dot. He stands at the door. His hands hold the flower like a child for baptism. And the priest nails the insane who has godlike hair. Well, that was his poem, pretty cool. So let's begin now.
Yes.
Well, beyond knowing that your father was a tax lawyer and insisted that you too become a lawyer, we do not know much. Will you please share with us something about your background? How was your childhood and youth? Any formative, familial, and intellectual influences, Kushal?
Well, our house used to be the center of a very big family sprawled across this city and our state of West Bengal. It was the center because my father's older brother had a very influential existence in the life of all the relatives because he was a very educated person and also a very how I can put it, a sage like person, and everyone was either coming for advice or he was also a doctor, so
Mhm.
medicine or some kind of rituals. So our family was always teeming with a quite a crowd, all relatives, or all sorts of friends. And I was there, a boy who only had one thing in his hand, that was book, because my mother was, would always shove a book in my hand and busy herself entertaining the guests. And I will, the first thing about the childhood I would remember uh, is that these windowsills, red cement, cold windowsills, and I am sitting on those windowsills with a book in my hand. I am reading. At once, I am conscious of all the conversation,
Mhm.
but I can't put a face with anything. Actually, so many people came in my life. I can't put faces with their experience. Rather, I can remember them by sound
Mhm.
or smell or something I was doing, reading or writing while they were talking.
Mhm.
That's how I interact with the persona who visits me. And this is how probably I began writing. Probably someday, at least how I remember it, my mother gave me an old diary, the one with maroon Rexine cover and all, and told me that, oh, you don't have any book to read today. Write something.
Mhm.
And that's how I'm writing.
Oh, great.
And and another thing, this is also formative. Now that while talking to you, I I think this is also formative for me that we never left this house. This is the ancient house, and I was first on the second floor, and
Mhm.
then ground floor, then on the top floor. Then again, as the co-sinners, co-sharers agree or disagree, the brothers quarrel or reach to an agreement, we will shift our family, everything to the floor. But never one of us left this house. So the books, those books are the doors and windows to other worlds.
Mhm.
Those were not only my escape, but also my traveling. So when writing, I always open the window a little wider. I mean, probably everyone do that at some point of time. That I wrote something that the book mm, couldn't write. book ended before writing that. I thought there should be this piece in that book, this ending in that book. So I began writing short stories in my mother tongue, and poetry, of course, because not always I have the patience to write a short story back then. So that's how I began.
So it was there latent in you, but it just required a bit of coaxing and prodding from your mother, from your parents, and that made you initiate. Yeah,
Yes.
great. That's some
But
real
there
interesting
was a
stuff.
conflict. You'll probably going to ask about my other formative years. I mean the advanced years, when our family will show some conflict.
Hmm.
Mm, I mean, mm, they it is okay to have writing as a hobby. It is always okay, but not more than that.
Uh-huh. Not for the living. Good as a pastime.
Yes, but how will you? How will one eat? How will one earn his food if he writes? Writing was always embracing poverty. So my father nudged me towards the profession, I mean, law. And here too, there will be a conflict, a wish fulfillment. My father was an income tax practitioner, so
Mhm,
he dreamed about being a litigation oriented practice,
mhm,
civil or criminal or both. And he wanted me to be a lawyer at Calcutta High Court or some equivalent forum.
mhm.
And by that time, I was giving up with my um, intention, life, everything. I was thinking, okay, anything, anything, okay, okay, something like that. There was no force in
Mm.
my life.
Well, in the words of Nick Victor, editor of International Times magazine and an artist, Kushal is, quote, from the master of deep or disturbing emotion, crackling, time warping poetry. He often graces the pages of International Times magazine and other publications. For most of his work, I am driven to illustrate them myself and with a great deal of joy too. Poems that sometimes, at a quick or superficial look, can seem a little depressing, but on deeper and deserving perseverance, they become poems of lovely feelings and rounded conclusions. Unquote. I would say it's a good summing up of Kushal as a poet.
Nick is a very good friend of mine.
Uh-huh.
When I first submitted to International Times,
Mhm.
he contacted me in a way that was more than an editor and a poet's relationship. We were family friends. We became gradually, and during my hardest period, and still now, he is the mm, godfather or helping hand to get by. I He is always standing by
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
That's the
So,
thing.
who are the major influences on you as a poet?
There are two phases in my life. In the first was my mother tongue, Bengali, and the second During my law practice, I developed this penchant for English writing because of practicality. Because I realized that I could write on my mobile phone. Back then, that was a Nokia with a keyboard. I had that one, something C or N series, I can't remember. But I can type short paragraphs and poetry, but in English because Bengali typing was not possible. And because of the time span I had at that point of time, in my that between the calls of cases or studying for the cases or entertaining a client and um, um, living my own life, was not plenty of time. So I had to write short writings and in English because of the above said reason. So my first phase was influenced by Bengali writers and especially Jibanananda Das and and Sudhindranath Datta. I and the next phase uh, when I was can you see me?
No.
Okay, some oh
Yeah,
yes, some
yes.
message. Yes, okay. Okay. So the thing is that in the second phase, I went to enroll myself in British Library and American Library, and I found the new world, the much bigger than I was reading, the newer world, the more modern writing rather. I devoured Ted Hooser, Ray Armantrout, then Franz Wright, and I was in love with Charles Simic
Mhm.
and Tony Hoagland, and I was so ecstatic discovering this new world that uh, I couldn't finish one single poem. I was reading, for example, if I am reading a Franz Wright poem, halfway I will stop and I will pick up my mobile phone and I will scribble something. That is the old way. When I was a child, I was writing what writers didn't write. Still, I am doing that same thing. I am writing what the poet didn't write, but was not included in their tight format. I was expanding their vision,
Mhm.
not in voice, but their vision. And what happened? mm, One day, I didn't have any computer back at home, desktop or anywhere, anything. One day in the library, I typed whether one can submit poems. The way when I was writing in Bengali, the way we did submit was snail mail. You
Mhm.
have to write. I had to write with my hand and then send it.
Mhm.
So I discovered that I can send poems to various magazines, and there are various forums. Back then, there was no Facebook. Okay,
Mhm.
and yet there was some forums called writerscafe.org or gather.com, and
Mhm.
then there are other chat boxes and where writers exchange their thoughts. And I enrolled myself in all of those, and I thought about buying a computer.
Mhm.
And I posted some poems in some forums, and I got ridiculed. Someone said, "You wrote that you are a lawyer and you write such weak English." And I realized, yes, I do. I do write very bad English because I learned a technical language.
Mhm.
I do not know a how to write poetic language outside the phrases I was taught. I can't, and I have limited vocabulary because the vocabulary I gathered was from also from technical books and from the reading poems and all that. I was not gathering the vocabulary the way I should. But this comment made me what I am. I began to read more, and I always would pencil the lines and scribble my thoughts on the margins, and then the words I will see dictionary. I will consult thesaurus. I will make little notebooks filled with words and thesaurus and all that things, synonyms and antonyms and all that. And then someday I noticed that I am doing this more than I am doing my law practice. I'm practicing law less and less. It didn't hurt me that much because.
Please increase your volume. You are not sounding very clear.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
I was practicing law less and less, and I was indulging in preparing myself for writing more and more by that time. And then Franz Wright himself appeared in my life. Somehow we met in some social media, and I sent him a message that how he influenced me, and he asked me to send him some writing so that he can read my writing, and that way we connected. And back then, Franz was going through a phase when he thought that all the MFA degree and all the things fail a poet, that they burden a poet with too much knowledge. Remember, Frost also said that towards the end, that limited knowledge gives us the courage. If courage is virtue, then it is gathered by limited knowledge. And I was blessed with limited knowledge. So with the help of Franz, I expanded my wings and submitted to actual magazines.
Mm-hmm. So those were few incidents you remember and the enduring influences on you and your creativity. Would you like to narrate some memorable incident of your life that has stayed on with you? Some court drama, legal drama, or literary encounter?
There are small bits, but all are cursory. Except books, everything is cursory. But yes, legal drama, more than legal drama, I would always remember writing short poems on my brief. And the judge, once I submit my brief to the bench, I mean, lawyers are bar, and the bench is judge. So I place my pleadings before the judge. The honorable judge would notice my writings. At first, they would ask, "What are these?" And then they accepted me as a poet, and they would always read it or smile and would remark something on that poetry. So that was a nice gesture from the honorable bench.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I would remember, that during a case of Poldia Petrochem, where I would return home after 1 o'clock or something, at night, 1 a.m. or something, after the entire day of practice, and after that consultation and preparing for the next day. It was a 60 hearing, continuous. So when I would return, there would be welcoming committee of dogs, and I was very afraid of dogs, and I would always call my father, please come on and take me home. So that was one of the fondest memory of my father, with whom I had this love, hate love relationship all along until his death, and he kept it open. So I am writing the what he couldn't write with my life.
So he
So
used to come to your rescue, always at your
yes.
disposal.
So-
Well,
and then
you have done your law course from Calcutta University and practiced it too till 2016. Now, the legal language is very objective and precise, whereas the language of poetry is totally different. It can be sensuous, can be sensual, subjective, or objective. So, how do you reconcile these two sides, legal and lyrical, in your poetry?
it is very easy. See, I believe even poetry, contrary to what Wallace Stevens said, that poetry, in poetry, a poet should entirely resist the logic. Poetry is also dependable on logic. It's the poet's inner logic.
Mhm,
This is the way we lay down our logic.
mhm,
We our without knowing our inner truths and line it up against the outer verity, and we lay them on our table, and then we we push
mm,
beyond the logic. Of course, we push beyond the logic, because whenever this inner logic, the way we um, uh, structure a sentence, the way we find the slant rhymes, the way we grab a conversation,
mm,
a pedestrian is striking with another pedestrian, and put it in a poem, that's logical.
mm,
But the conclusion and the fight against the moral structure of the society, yes, poets always push the boundary. The more we push, even to contradict our own comfort zone, we push the boundary of our own comfort zone, our logic, then we are actually making greater poetry, reaching for a higher truth.
mhm,
But the base is always that logic. So there is a similarity between a concise nature of the legal treatise and the expanding nature of the poetry. And legal language also taught me another thing. Now I am saying I realize that to compartmentalize,
mhm,
to prioritize, and to say what others are not saying, and to not to say what can be tedious in the ear of judge. So I am not. I learned to tidy up my poems. I always follow language group of poetry,
mhm,
but that doesn't mean I blindly follow. Sometimes I am more expansive poetry than the language poets generally indulge in. But all these are not contradictory.
mhm,
Um, um, uh, at one point of time, a poet writes only one poem. Okay. Even I will argue that throughout the lifetime of a poet writes only one poem. At the age of at the age of 6 at class 1, I began writing poetry, and till date I am writing the same poem, fragmented in thousands of lines. And throughout as the poem develops and as I develop, these languages, these learnings from law, from conversation, from art, from movies, from books, be that books of theories, books of poetry, or even thrillers, all everything create help to create that format, the poem, that lifelong poem. So there is no contradiction. Everything is like your in nourishment. Everything is nourishment.
Yeah, so your individual views, that's how you proceed with it. Great. Certain aspects of your life have been interpreted by Julie Krim Shevin, a writer and editor, which I would like to quote here. She writes, "It may be of interest to know that Poddar doesn't work on a computer or on paper, but rather on a phone. This is where he both writes and sketches. He has no private space at home and no psychological support from his family as regards his arts pursuits." How far is this true? Tell us something about your writing process, from inspiration to imagery to completion of a poem as a complete idea. How do you go about it?
At that point of time, Julie was absolutely right. I didn't have any particular place where I can write, where I can read without being disturbed. So I was multitasking. I was reading, I was writing, I was saying, yes, okay. Everything I was doing, and I was doing that with the help of my mobile phone. Back then, it was not this smart, but yet somehow I was managing it. And now it is not true, because when I met my wife, I decided online. We met online, not because of my poetry, but because of my paint. She loved to paint, and she liked one of my painting, and then we met, and everything happened. And she dared me to leave my profession and began writing and embrace that poverty. So I began writing, and my parents accepted gingerly, and I found my love fountain pen, and then I realized what I lacked before, that because I had almost next to no time, more than writing, what suffered was editing. I didn't have any time for editing, and
A bit louder, please.
I didn't have any time for editing.
Okay.
More than writing, the lack of time caused editing error. And with my fountain pen, I began writing, and still now I walk. First, how the writing begins nowadays. I send my daughter to my school, then I begin walking until the school ends.
Oh, this that long?
Yes, I walk and walk and walk, and I hear things, I smell things, and I see things. And sometimes those some conversation or something I have not heard, but I have guessed. And there is a story. Always there is a story. The world is made of stories.
Mhm.
So I pick something, and I immediately sit somewhere.
Mhm.
Generally, it is morning school, so generally all the market and all the shops are closed. So I sit on some structure, and out of my tote bag, I bring out my notebook and fountain pen, and I began to write. Generally, I complete the entire poem at once. After that, I close my pen and go back. And in the evening, when again I have my writing time, I sit to edit, copy and edit on my computer. Now, this is the editing process. But when I wrote it by hand, it was already, there was seconds delay. By writing with a fountain pen, you have some delay. It is not that quick from like a jotter or
Yeah.
yes, dot pen, ball pen. So I some delay, some nanoseconds delay. It enriches your poetry, and then when you type, you have the second scope to edit further. So nowadays I do that, and this is how I write.
Quite fascinating. Besides being a poet, you are also an editor of Word Surfacing and a qualified and experienced lawyer. Well, what has been your experience of editing this magazine and what is its USP?
It's editing. Editing could have been easier. Editing. The worst part of editing is gathering the poems, call for submissions, and then handling the poets.
Mhm.
I'm a poet. I know what kind of anxiety I suffer when I submit a poem to an editor. I suffer from. I do not actually, because already the poem is past. I am writing something else. But generally, a poet suffers from an anxiety, acute anxiety, whether the poem will be published. Why is the editor uh, yet to yet to interact with me? Will the publication respect my format?
Mhm.
Will they change something? So many things.
Mhm.
So the editing, whether I'm editing for word surfacing or sub editing for Outlook India, the most difficult part was handling the poet's anxiety, writer's anxiety, the one who enrich our magazines, without whom our magazine means nothing. But they are also the most vulnerable creature, and they disturb our own integral space. So editing means interacting. Editing means mm, assuring that your writing will be published the way you want. But sometimes, in the recent guest editing part, sometimes some poet may find that some format or something is broken. Then I would assure him that meaning is not lost. See, the format and everything beyond that, the reader can read your thought. Reader can interpret, build his interpretation
Mhm.
out of those words. Maybe not the way you want, but it is never the way you want. Reader has his own
A
interpretation.
bit louder, please.
Reader always has his own interpretation. So don't worry, this is all right. Assurance. Editor's main weapon is assurance, nothing else.
Assurance.
Yes, and that's the how we nourish the poet, the writer. Assurance.
Mhm. Well, it seems to be a common territory as editors, sometimes
Yes,
brickbats, sometimes bouquets. And in these dismal times, it's more of brickbats.
yes.
As a practicing poet, what constitutes fine poetry? What are its major elements that elevate certain type of writing over others?
Uh, when when I began to read social media poets,
Mm-hmm.
so-called Insta poets, the first problem I faced,
Mm.
if I reject their poetry,
Mm.
then I might
Mhm.
behave the way academia behaves any outsider.
Mhm.
Kafka suffered, even Derrida suffered. To some extent, I suffered because I am a lawyer and not um, in the bracket of academia. So, why should I reject someone's writing because she is writing on Instagram post, writing something shallow, might be, in my opinion, might be
Mhm.
shallow, some catchy phrases, with some catchy phrases. No, I can't reject,
Mhm.
but I can certainly lay down my choice.
Mhm.
I believe a true writer is true writer when he or she uh, feels sad when his or her profile picture gets more like than his right or her writing. I mean to say, you should be sad. You should be sad if your words suffer because of your face or your picture.
Mhm.
If you are poet, you value your words, your heart you is in in those phrases, and you stand with your heart in your face outside your skin, your comfort zone.
Mhm.
And that has nothing to do with how do you look, what picture is accompanied with, what artwork is accompanied with
Mhm.
those poetry. Apart from that, poetry has no category, no restriction, nothing. But I don't like it, like others may like. I can't stop myself on them. It is their choice. I
Mhm.
I prefer that there should be a, mm, a, an art for
Mhm.
reaching a better truth, a truth that I can't reach by reading something or by writing something. I mean, the writing is not finished at all, never. Yes, I prefer rounded off ending, but my writing is never ended. It is
Mhm.
always there is something to add, always something to add. But my gut's feeling always says, no, that's for another writing. Stop here. Don't drag too much.
Mhm.
So, apart from that, there is nothing a poet should reach for.
Mhm. Yeah, you have very different themes, and sometimes themes are common in your works, I've seen, but the way you have expressed yourselves is totally different. Like a poem on mother, I remember I read of yours, and there I think you compared her with a insect.
Yes, and in one, a circus lion,
Mm.
and everything.
So that was
For
for the first time I read such a, analogy of a mother with an insect. Quite
yes,
weird, but then it made sense when I read the whole thing.
harmonious construction. That is another thing I always believed in. You, when you read a poem, that poem mm, is part of your own life. As a reader, your own life is enriching that poem. In case of perfume, you have noticed that the scent of the perfume depends on the weather, on your own skin smell,
Mhm.
and psychology of one who is
State
sniffing
of
that
mind. State of
state of
mind.
mind. So, so a poem also, whenever I wrote a poem, it's done. It is out there in the world forever. Whoever reading it uh, mm, finds it a new. It is every time he or she reads, it is his or her own writing that he never wrote.
Mhm.
Okay. So whenever you are you for example, that analogy you mentioned, that insect or something else, that anthropomorphism or whatever you call it, depends uh, if whether you are giving the poem the deserving time, or if you are finding something in your own life that matches that poem.
Mhm. True.
That's the construction of the poetry, that
Mhm.
harmony, nothing else.
Yes, that's true. I agree with that, and that's a wonderful explanation you have given. Now, tell us something about your favorite book, or if you feel like you can read out something to us.
Yes, actually, I can. One of my major influences was Charles Simic, and this book, Walking, Walking the Black Cat,
Mhm.
was my favorite. It used to be my go-to book when I had something in my mind I couldn't quite express. It
Mhm.
didn't influence me, but it gave me a clarity, a magnifying glass or some sort, that or a green screen, a chroma screen behind your background, that that made it easy to make a scene of your own. So I'll read one poem from that book.
Yeah.
What the gypsy told my grandmother while she was still a young girl, where illness and famine will make you their favorite grandchild. You will be like a blind person watching a silent movie. You will chop onions and pieces of your heart into the same hot skillet. Your children will sleep in a suitcase tied with a rope. Your husband will kiss your breasts every night as if they were two gravestones. Already the crows are grooming themselves for you and your people. Your oldest son will lie with flies on his lips without smiling or lifting his hand. You will envy every ant you ever meet in your life and every roadside weed. Your body and soul will sit on separate stoops, chewing the same piece of gum. Little cutie, Are you for sale? The devil will say. The undertaker will buy a toy for your grandson. Your mind will be hornet's nest even on your deathbed. You will pray to God, but God will hang a sign that he is not to be disturbed. Question no further. That's all I know.
Mhm.
That powerful scenery, it always tears through my heart.
Terrific. Now, any favorite poem of another poet that still talks to you despite a long gap that has impacted you strongly?
There are so many that I can't probably remember. Of course, I don't have the books on my hand now. That's another problem. So I always remember Frost, many Frost's poem,
Mm-hmm.
or yes,
Yeah,
but I can't recite.
even I'm a fan
Like
of Frost. Robert Frost,
and
I'm a fan of him.
yes, almost everyone I have met, they have
Yeah.
something about yes. And Philip Larkin
Mm-hmm.
and Simon and they they were major influence, but I can't read because I don't have the books right at my disposal.
Mm-hmm.
disposal. There's that.
Well, so we proceed. Any message to the viewers?
Mm, don't judge a poet by his interview.
Oh, that's a good
Read
one.
him. Make his poems your own, and if possible, begin writing.
Mm-hmm. That's
Every reader has a poem, and he is reading because he didn't find his own poetry. He don't know how to begin and how to end. That tight compartment
true.
where poetry exists.
So reading and writing, both are important. So one has to keep reading, but simultaneously also try his or her hands on
Yes,
paper.
of course.
Yeah.
You there. I told you about the Frost interview that limited knowledge gives you courage. So if you that how actually many academicians suffered, according to Franz Wright, because they read so much.
Hmm.
They okay, I'll read this line. If what if someone already wrote better, something better along the way? Of course, there is. Everyone have said the sky is blue, so your sky won't be any bluer than them, but your sky will be yours. So begin right.
It's your individual style. You can't be, Robert Frost or Hemingway, but you would be a Kushal Poddar. So that's it. So it
Thank you.
has been a wholesome conversation, Kushal. I wish you the very best for your future prospects. May you rise and shine. Thanks once again. Thanks, viewers. In the next episode, we will be back again with yet another important guest with us. Till then, bye bye.
Right. Thank you.